Doom is one of the most famous and influential games of all time. It not only created a huge franchise with millions of fans, but it also helped pioneer the entire genre of first-person shooters, and was one of the very first stepping stones that helped define the genre, alongside earlier games such as Wolfenstein 3D, and those that came out shortly after Doom, such as Quake, and many other 90s FPS games. Released in 1993, the original Doom was developed by, at the time, a small team at id Software, a company that had grown in popularity a year prior due to the success of their game Wolfenstein 3D. While Wolfenstein was fairly successful, it wasn't quite a franchise starter, but Doom was big. Very, very big. And it became an instant hit after release, and so did its sequel, Doom 2. These games helped to innovate in ways that people had never seen before. For instance, Doom was one of the very first games to allow stuff like elevators and vertical doors to be added into the environment. The list of great things that was done with these two games goes on and on forever, but in this video we are going to be focusing on what makes the games so great, and how even after 29 years, classic Doom is still the greatest of all time. So, with the usual intro rambling out of the way, let's get into the first reason why Doom is still the GOAT. Modding has been a big part of video games for an extremely long time now, and one of the games that helped introduce modding was of course the original Doom, and especially its sequel, Doom 2, but this didn't come until a little while after the games were actually released. The first ever mod for classic Doom came out on December 10th, 1995, with the game later going open source in 1997, a year after the release of Doom's successor, Quake, which was released on the 22nd of June, 1996. Despite all this, Doom has managed to have one of the most popular and longest running modding scenes in the history of gaming. I'm not even joking when I say that there is probably at the very least, 500,000 mods that have been made for this game over the years. And to be fair, that is probably drastically lower than the actual number. Modding is what has kept Doom so alive over all the years it's been out. Even through points in time where there was nothing to be seen from the franchise for very long amounts of time, such as the 12-year gap between Doom 3 and Doom 2016, there were still people playing and talking about mods for these games. It really shows the power in which a fan base of a game or game series can have when they are given the proper tools. If it wasn't for the fan base making so many mods since the release of the game, I don't think Doom would have been nearly as successful as it is now. But I think it's about time we move on to our next segment. Something that follows the same kind of theme as our last point is the variety of source ports and different ways of playing Doom and Doom 2 outside of just modding the game. I think source ports have done absolute wonders for these two games as they make it a lot more accessible for them to be played. This is because I doubt many people would really like to be playing these games in their original forms, because it is not only very hard to figure out how to use it, but it also isn't the best experience in my opinion. If you're playing these two Doom games on consoles such as Xbox, PlayStation and Nintendo Switch, then the only option that you have is to play the Unity port, which is fine I guess, but in my opinion it really isn't the best way of playing these games. But for the people who can't afford a PC and just need to play on a stricter budget, or for the people who just don't like playing on PC, the Unity port is a decent enough option I think. But by far the best way to play classic Doom is of course on PC. As not only can you mod the game like I said in my last point, but you also get a much wider variety of source ports to use, which are quick to set up and can greatly improve the experience. Making games easier to get into and more accessible is always a good thing, and I think the huge variety in how you can play the original Doom games has greatly assisted in it staying so popular over the years. However, I think we should move on to the next reason on my list. This next segment is something that I personally find to be very interesting, not just in Doom, but in every game that I play. But what is it, I hear you ask? Well, it's the game's level design and how those maps are. I think level design is one of the core pillars of what makes a game, as it's something that is almost necessary. But what about Doom's level design makes it so good? And why is it one of the reasons that I call classic Doom the greatest of all time? Well, it's because the level design of Doom makes you think, and how it forces you to use some problem solving skills to navigate through the game. Games that make you think while you're playing them are often some of the most successful games ever made. A few examples of games that would make you think are games such as Resident Evil, any of the Souls games, and probably the most obvious of all, which are puzzle games such as Portal. Now the thing I like most about the maps of the OG Doom games is that every level serves as its own puzzle, with you having to track down different coloured keys to open various different doors and other barriers that are preventing you from reaching the level exit. Many of Doom's levels are built like mazes, and you oftentimes see yourself having to backtrack to see where you've been and where you haven't, finding switches, doors and everything else to try reach the end. When a game makes the player think, it can oftentimes make the player a lot more invested in the game, which keeps them coming back to try and figure it out. But after all this, let's move on to the final point, and the main reason why I think the classic Doom games have stood the test of time, and how it has remained the definitive GOAT of the first-person shooter genre. Now, the final reason on this list is that the game's overall combat and gameplay are so fundamentally solid. The reason why this game has managed to hold up so well is because of how well it feels to play. Let me explain. Doom is simple. Everything in the classic Doom games has a pattern to it, and it is very easy to learn, which leads to a very fluid and fun feeling gameplay loop that you can easily get sucked into. Both of the classic games, Doom and Doom 2, work like this. You spawn in, shoot some enemies as you make your way around the map, picking up valuable health and ammo items along the way, with any power-ups you find, with the single goal of making it to the exit door, which is done by finding different keys like I mentioned in the previous segment. This gameplay loop is extremely fun, and especially when you're constantly fighting all these different types of cool and interesting enemies, you really fall in love with how the game plays. While Doom may look like a very primitive game from the outside, which to be fair it is, it also is a game that holds up extremely well and is extremely worth your time because of how great the gameplay is. I'd say the three greatest strengths of this game are firstly its weapons and how they feel to use, secondly its movement, which when paired with being able to freely look up and down through the use of a source port such as GZ Doom, is a lot more fun. And finally, its enemies, which, like I said, all have patterns to them for the player to learn. But what do you think? Is classic Doom the greatest of all time, or is it not? Give me your reasons in the comments down below. And while you're down there, I recommend liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help further the discussion. If you would like to discuss this with anyone else with similar interests, then I would recommend joining my Discord server, as it's a great way of socializing with like-minded people. Along with that, if you'd like to support me personally and assist funding more videos like this, then I'd recommend checking out my merch store, as I'm sure you'll find something you like on there. And if you would like to see more content like this, then I'd recommend checking out my latest video, here on the left, and also having a look at my video where I ranked all of the Doom games from worst to best. That will be here on the right. But other than that, that's all I have to say, so thank you for watching, and as always, have a nice day.